I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Amy Paget. I currently live at Meliadora at David Holmgren and Stu Dennett's property in central Victoria. I'm originally from Biggar in New South Wales, a small town kind of near Crookall. And I'm using COVID-19 as a chance to become a peasant. So that's sort of my journey at the moment. And I'm also a committee member for ABSA, Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance. We are a farmer-led organisation that fights for the rights to nourishing and culturally appropriate food grown and distributed in ethical and ecologically sound ways, along with our right to collectively determine our own food system. As most of you would know, we're a body that organises, fights for the rights of eaters and producers here and abroad, and we can't do that without a large membership base. So I know a lot of you tonight would be ABSA members, and we've had lots of people join up in the last couple of weeks, which is really encouraging. But if you aren't yet, we really need your voice. So I do encourage you to go to the ABSA website and sign up and join and stand with us in our fight for food sovereignty. Just some housekeeping. So if everyone would like to just turn their cameras off now, and we'll just leave mine and the microphone of Robert Pekin and Emma Kate, who we're interviewing tonight, in our 6th session of our Solidarity Economy sessions. So we are also recording this, so we'll be able to distribute that to people who aren't able to come tonight. And the format will run like we've run it before. We'll have a chat for the first half hour, and then those are welcome to write down questions that you'd like me to ask our panelists, or if you're happy to, I can shoot it over to you. You can turn your camera on and sort of ask the question in person. So tonight we have Robert Pekin and Emma Kate Rose. Rob was the co-originator of ABSA many moons ago. And together they're both involved in Food Connect, which is a community-based enterprise in sunny Queensland, who for the last 15 years have been connecting local producers with Brisbane-based eaters. Rob, would you like to kick this off? I guess the first question we could sort of start with is if you'd like to talk through the early days of Food Connect and set the scene of how you sort of built solidarity between farmers, employees and eaters.
Sure, thanks Amy, and thanks so much you and Tammy and the ABSA team for inviting us on tonight. We're from, as Amy said earlier, sunny Brisbane on Turrbal and Yagara country, Turrbal on the north side of the river and Yagara on the south side, unceded country. And we really acknowledge we get direct wisdom from the elders present and elders future. There's a few Indigenous kids who have got uncanny understanding of how the world works, and elders past. So yeah, so in the early days, for those of you that want to get the blow by blow, but Amy was just saying she just finished the chapter that Emma and I co-wrote. Fair Food, you can get the blow by blow there, but the summary version is I was born and bred. That's the book.
Well played, Emma. Okay.
The summary version is I was born and bred dairy farmer, oldest of 9 kids, left the farm to become an aircraft engineer. Come back 11 years later and no one else wanted the farm. Although the youngest one sort of did, but he was still at school. And so I started share farming with Dad and got really into the whole farming scene. But what I witnessed in the years previous to the years that I'd come back was this, you know, there's a lot of cooperatives, there's a lot of dairy farmers down my road, down Larpin Road. There would have been 10 dairy farmers who all did all sorts of, you know, amazing things together. Harvested, built each other's dairies. You know, there was an amazing just vibe and feel. Footy clubs were strong, tennis clubs were strong. You know, it was a thriving community. And when I come back, there was only 3 of us left on that road, and due to basically the corporatisation or the demutualisation first off of all of those cooperatives, and then the eventual corporatisation. But I really loved farming and got into it with gusto and through a series of events, become more ecologically aware and framed the way I farmed and the methodology through that lens. So this is the early 90s. And just really that, once for those people who grow regeneratively or whatever form these days, that once you go down that road, there's no turning back. It's a stimulating, intellectually involving field of research and obviously application of that research, or probably the application of that research, the doing and then the thinking, and then you go and do. So it's an amazing journey. But I bought the farm at a pretty high peak. I had to buy out all my siblings, and then eventually, after buying the farm, so I share farm for 3 years, and then owned it in my own right. But drought, falling milk prices, and a few other things, the banks forced me off the farm, and I'd become a bit lost and a bit
jaded.
Yeah, very. I went into a pretty bad space. But just as I was leaving, there was a group of dairy farmers, and we were looking at how we could distribute food in a different way, or distribute our milk where we had more control. And someone come down from Ballarat. I was in Colac in Western Victoria, and someone from Ballarat come down and told us about this concept of CSA. It was only a brief half hour. She gave us a brief idea. For those that don't know, community supported agriculture, or CSA means community supported agriculture, and we'll go into that in a deeper way later on. But that thought bubble stayed with me after I left the farm, and I started reading about it, finding farmers who practiced that way, and really got fanatical about the whole concept. Probably for the next since then, that's 1998 when I lost the farm. I then that's all I've been involved in is community supported agriculture. I drove some people mad with just continually talking about it and delving deeply into it. And because I was a bit pissed off and a bit angry, sorry, Amy, were you going to ask me?
I was just going to say, if that was in 1998,
yeah,
what examples of CSA were there in Australia at the time?
Yeah, not many. They were all veggie-based ones. There was one in Tasmania, one in the Kangaroo Valley, called Doorstop CSA. There was another one up at Bathurst. We're talking the 1980s, 1990s. They started. There weren't many, Amy, and there wasn't a lot of information. Most of the CSAs I learnt off are all in America or Germany. And there's a few in England as well, quite a few in England. But USA, Canada was where the main CSA action was happening. And there's a great book called by Trauger Grow and anyway, I read that book like it was my Bible. Emma will pull up the book, but it was an amazing book that went right into the details of it all. But through the process of the next 7 years of starting my own market garden and operating as a CSA in Tasmania, maybe 12 months later, it took me about 12 months to recover from losing the dairy farm. I was pretty angry, as I was saying before, and really wanted to radically put a different model on the ground that represented the opposite of my lived experience of being a dairy farmer. I wanted to be in contact with the person who drank my milk. I wanted to have some control or some say in the pricing. I was really deeply annoyed with the way corporate farming had taken over, and you have a CEO of a dairying company earning over $1 million, and dairy farmers being forced to earn 19 cents, as I was at the time, 19 cents a litre. Those were the sort of things that really framed how I set up Food Connect eventually 7 years later when I arrived in Brisbane, and through a series of events ended up with a whole bunch of Brisbane mums who were really keen to bring about the CSA model. And I had about 30 farmers who had all told me that CSA idea of growing 30, 40, 50 varieties of vegetables was a little bit tricky and difficult, and there wasn't a lot of examples in Australia at that point in time. There were some great examples in America, fantastic CSA farmers who are growing, something like off an acre were growing for about 80 people, whereas the
Mhm.
best I could manage was about 15 people per acre. And Australia also had, because of the supermarket duopoly, it was also a very different customer expectation around eating produce seasonally all year round. And there was also, we just didn't have the scales or the sort of the intensity of populations that
Farms of Tomorrow.
yeah, Farmers of Tomorrow, that's the book, Farmers of Tomorrow by Trauger Groff and Stephen McFadden. So that whole experience led me to set up Food Connect. When I set it up, even though it was a PTY Ltd, I brought in some articles from a not-for-profit constitution that meant that the company could never be sold. So I didn't want to see all the effort that everyone puts into developing a company, the farmers, the employees, all the eaters who get on board in the early days, because it's an imperfect, when you ever start out a business, it's a very imperfect model to start off with. I never wanted to see that effort by everyone being sold off by an owner.
Mm-hmm.
I protected it with this mission lock. I put a 1-to-2 ratio, so no one could earn any more than twice the lowest paid worker per hour. I wanted to have at least 40% of Farmgate went back to farmers. At that point in time, it was around about 10 cents in the dollar, went back to farmers in the retail price, Coles and Woolies. It was all based around my, this, and the other thing I was really concerned that farmers took all of the risk, and we needed to come up with a model where we had a relationship with farmers, and farmers could sit down with whoever it was that was distributing that food and come up with an agreed price. Sure, it might not be the true cost or the cost that they would like to have in an ecological sense, but it was, it was a start, and it was a conversation that enabled and empowered farmers to think about their farm in a different way. And so that's basically, that's the model to today. It's a multi-farmer model where, as imperfect as, and it's still very imperfect, where the main, and the reason why it was called Food Connect was to connect farmers with themselves, farmers with their land, eaters with farmers, and all the people in that short food chain system, that local food distribution system, connect them all where the model was based around relationships, not transactions.
And to touch back, Rob, on your experience when you went back to farm, the family farm, and you said you had this desire or this yearning to know who drove the truck and to know who was drinking your milk. Was there a similar sense of that sort of desire for community and connectivity? Because I'm assuming like the generation older to you would have experienced that in their working lives. Were they sort of sad to see that go, or were they sort of like, well, that's progress and we don't really do it like that anymore? Yeah,
it was a bit like the latter. It was just progress, and that's the way we do it these days, But back when my grandfather existed, there was ice cream co-ops, cream co-ops, cheese co-ops, and a milk co-op, and all sorts of other cooperatives as well. There was a lot more going on. There was carrot farmers, onion farmers, cabbage farmers, pea. We grew a lot of peas. Whereas by the time I got back, we were just all milking cows, and that's sort of the norm. That we didn't even know what it was turned into. Like I didn't know whether it was a dried, whether it was a powdered milk or whether it was turned into cheese, or whether it went, was sold into Sydney as fresh milk. I had no idea. And when I lost the farm, that void, that gaping yearning, that I'd look back on, I went, God, there was just nothing there for me as a dairy farmer, and nothing to absorb the fall when I fell. Like it was just me. And so I wonder, a mate of mine committed suicide at the same time. There was quite a lot of really not good things happening at the time because of the forced deregulation on farms and just the drought and all of those things. There was just nothing like we have today. Like today we have a lot more, people are talking about suicide. People are wanting to connect with their farmers. There's a lot more awareness of or people wanting to know where their food comes from. Whereas
drought relief packages.
Back when I lost the farm, I just fell through the cracks, and it was a deeply traumatic time that I went through, that I wanted to put a model on the ground that in some way, hopefully, it could resolve some of those issues.
And in terms of the farms that you work with right now with Food Connect, are
Mm.
they primarily small scale operations, or do you deal with some people who are monocultures like you sort of were managing a sort of
not
big dairy or big?
Oh yeah.
big
So
growth?
there are some. I mean, we've encouraged most of our farmers to diversify. So our dairy farmer, the dairy farmer that originally supplied Food Connect, they now grow ginger, quite a few other crops as well as doing dairying. So we've really encouraged that diversity. But we do have some big, larger scale organic farmers who do 100 acres of broccoli or whatever. But we're only about we only take a portion of their crop, obviously. But
Sure.
most of the farmers are small scale, like quite a lot of young farmers. And we sort of have two types of farmers: the farmers who want to go through us, like they want to use us to build their confidence, develop connections, and go direct. And that's a great thing. But the majority of our farmers are the ones who just want us to facilitate all that, human stuff, the human touch stuff. They don't really like people or too many people per se. So we have two pathways for farmers, and that's our business model was based on, to go back on the original business model was, I don't really care what methodology you are, whether you're biodynamic, Colothumpian, organic, whatever it is. I'm just interested in really good farmers who have been enabled to think about their farming with the consumer in mind, with the health in mind, with the landscape in mind. And, that's all they need. And then we provide them a conduit to becoming accountable and being held responsible for that, which is only through face-to-face. You don't need a a certification for that sort of things. So that was, and that builds solidarity. That builds, we not long into it, I remember getting an email because one of our farmers was being threatened by FoodSafe Queensland, and they penned the email, "That's my farmer, and I'm going to protect my farmer, and I want that product from that farmer." So, it shifts people's consciousness from, this, Well, yes, that's right. Yeah, the theory of change. We were just talking about theory of change because we're going through a whole new modelling of our theory of change. Was participation in the food system. So hence the city cousin. We don't want people getting home delivered. We never home delivered for probably the first 7 or 8 years because I felt that home delivery was a passive eater, and I detested people being passive. You had to be involved. You had to go and pick up from a city cousin. You had to develop connections. You had to write a farm letter. You had to go on a farm tour. So I wanted people to actively become engaged in the whole food system so they would become aware and then they build something, out of their lived experience of becoming aware or becoming woke to how, to things that we've all got blind spots. And so I wanted to provide an opportunity for both farmers and for eaters to come at this from wherever they were at, and then, through that process, go, oh my God, I remember one farm, we took him to a citrus farm out at Gayndah, and he did use one chemical, and everyone there asked him about this one chemical, and once he explained the whole thing to them all, everyone went, "Oh my God, no wonder you use that chemical,"
Right.
So yeah, so it that process of face-to-face asking questions, thinking about it, and going, "Oh my God, yeah," that brings a different realisation rather than a label or a certificate.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And on the Food Connect sort of organisation as a whole, Emma Kate, it'd be great to hear from you on the Food Connect shed that was fundraised for last year. If you'd like to give us a little rundown on that.
Hi everyone. I'm the second act of the show.
This is the best story.
I don't know about that. I think the fact that this little enterprise has lasted 15 years is the best story in the face of a lot of adversity. But anyway, so very long story short, we had been badgering, well, we always knew, because we're very much involved in the social enterprise sector as well here in Brisbane. It's a very supportive, kind of inclusive group of entrepreneurs, you know, doing things for social change, just generally, not just in the food system, but right across the economy. And there's a common thing in social enterprises, like, you know, security of tenure is the thing for social entrepreneurs, because if we've got a place from which to do something and it's safe and it's secure and it's affordable, then we can, you know, we don't have to worry about that. It's another thing we don't have to worry about while we affect social change. So so we had this in mind the whole time. One day we were going to own our own shed, and for many years we'd been following you know, all the stuff that's happening in the US around local food hubs, and really admiring slow money and all that sort of stuff. Really admiring how a lot of farmers in the US and communities were sort of getting together and creating their own local food hubs, mainly seeded with federal government money to sort of revitalise and renew a lot of the rural areas. But we just loved that model of co-ownership. So we were badgering our landlord for quite a while to buy it, and he resisted for many years, and then one year he eventually said, okay, all right, and I'll give you first option, you've got 1 year to find the money. So that was in 2017, and then we had a year, and didn't take us too long to kind of find you know, a few impact investors, and based in Melbourne, you know, property investors who really wanted to support social enterprise. And it wasn't too long where we had like 3 or 4 who were really interested in helping us, you know, buy this building off Wayne, our landlord, and we'd only been renting a third of his whole property. So it was a big, you know, it was a big undertaking. Like, we actually didn't need that much space. What were we going to do with the rest of it? So we had to sort of, you know, develop up all our food hub plans in a bit of a hurry to try and, you know, articulate the vision. And eventually Rob came back from Melbourne, I think, and one day, and he said, oh, you know, said to the board, we've got buyers, we're ready to go. And then we sort of all looked at each other and we were like, and I said, but what's the difference between one white male owning this building, like our current landlord, and 4 white males owning this building? Like,
based
how?
in
And they're all based in Melbourne, whereas with
Yeah.
Wayne, at least we knew him. He lived down the road and we had a great relationship with him. So what's the difference? How are we moving the needle? So, you know, taking the inspiration from the US and the solidarity economy stuff and, you know, community ownership, it was very serendipitous. Like, literally not long after we had that conversation, the equity crowdfunding legislation was passed in federal parliament. And Anna Gunther from Pledge Me in New Zealand had just landed in Brisbane after doing equity crowdfunding for 6 years over there, really successfully with social enterprise.
Wow.
And we got to know her, and she just
we
said,
stalked her. We stalked her.
So we ended up being her first campaign.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it took us 3 months to raise the money with our crowd in the end. It was a bit of a roller coaster. We initially had a month to crowdfund the money, but we realised that first month was pretty much taken up with educating everybody about what equity crowdfunding was, because no one knew. They thought it was a donation, and we were no, it's not a donation. It's actually a proper share in a proper company. And you know, we had to explain the difference between the Food Connect shed as a separate entity to Food Connect social enterprise, and so there was a lot of education to do. So anyway, it took us the full amount allocated, which was 3 months by law. It's like, that's it then. If you don't get your money by the end of that date on the 3 months, then you don't get a cent, no matter how much has been pledged. Yeah.
And what were you aiming to raise?
So we were aiming, the minimum was, so the agreed price with the landlord was $1.8 million for the warehouse. And we knew that we had about 100 grand in land tax and about 6% of
Stamp
fees. Stamp
Sure.
duty. 6% of fees went back to Pledge Me as the fundraising fee.
Whoa.
So it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we needed at least 2 million just to get over the line and not put too much stress on us. And on the last day, we were at 1.2 million. And 5:30
We
that
brought
night.
it home. The crowd brought it home.
Yeah, 5:30 that night we hit the 2 million mark.
Unbelievable. What
Yeah.
a story.
Yeah. So, and one of the other things that was really interesting about the whole process was as we were going through the campaign, even preparing for the campaign as well, I kind of had in the back of my mind that, you know, a lot of Food Connect supporters and customers are women. And, you know, women tend to lose out. Like, I know my mother did. I know I did when I divorced my husband, when my first marriage broke down. You know, you suddenly have no access and it's very difficult to get access to enough resources to put a roof over your head, let alone own property. And women traditionally just, you know, have always had a hard time in accessing the security of having a roof over their head. So for me, it was really personal in many ways.
Oh.
So I really wanted to make sure that as many women as possible could actually access this crowdfunding campaign. So we kept the minimum get-in share very low at $500. So if you could afford $500 investment, you were a part owner in the shed. And by the end of the campaign, we had around 85%, I think it is,
The
ownership.
goal was 50%.
Ownership by women.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
no, remarkable. Yeah, the goal was 50%, and we thought if we hit that, that'll be an amazing effort. But it was, at the end of the day, it was 80. Yeah, just a bit over 84%.
Well, Rob, from what you said before, like women, I guess, have played an important journey in this. In that you said it was Brisbane mums that sort of.
Yeah, that's right. Because I was so, I was still, you know, 6 or 7 years later, I was still pretty deflated by my experience running the farm and a few other things that happened after. And I really didn't want to be out in front running another business. I was pretty, you know, I just didn't want to be out there again. But these Brisbane mums who got around me, and after it only took them about 2 months, and they ambushed me one night for dinner.
He wishes.
And, no, it was very clever. They knew I was at the end of it. It was a trial period with Food Connect, and I was the last delivery, and they basically ambushed me for dinner. And then at dinner they said, Rob, you have to run this, you have to do this and this. It's we just love, you know, what you're about, and we'll back you all the way. And that gave me the confidence.
Yeah.
Being backed by them, and like the business advisory group that was, you know, lasted, you know, in the early years of Food Connect, it was all made up. Actually, they had 2 men who and I tell the story, 2 men who wanted to just turn up to board meetings and just ask for the financial reports and a whole bunch of it. We're running a brand new business. We're creating a completely different market. We're inventing our own software, all this stuff, and they wanted, you know, audited financial reports. So the women said, righto, we're going to reform this advisory board. And they sent an email out and said, you've got 48 hours to respond and say, yes, I'm in the advisory board, otherwise you're out. Because they knew they wouldn't read their emails. And reform the board. Yeah, reform the advisory board.
Oh, a takeover.
Yeah, takeover. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And they were operational as well as, you know, advisory. They were just, you know, whether it was IT, finance, HR, they were, you know, because we rapidly grew. Like we grew, you know, very, very fast. You know, in probably 4 or 5 years, we're at 45 employees. It was quite a crazy time. And and I learned a lot. You know, like as a white dairy farmer, I was very naive to a lot of things around social justice, a lot of things around equity. You know, as Emma just spoke then, and they really formed through robust conversation who I am today. So I owe a lot to those original women.
Bag ladies.
Bag ladies. How interesting. I guess we could have one more question before I throw it over to those in the wings. It'd be great to just sort of have a summary or a snapshot as to how COVID-19 has affected Food Connect, and maybe, a story to sort of show how important it has been for the community that you feed, or how resilient, you know, you have been.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
it was kind of,
almost expected, but not expected. So it reminded us of previous times that we've been through. So in terms of like the GFC, we've been through the GFC. We got through that somehow. Because like back in the GFC, we thought, oh my God, our demographic is, people who are well educated and have a bit of money. Like that's our traditional demographic. We've got two very distinct groups: poor students and rich inner city people. That's kind of weird. So, but we thought that that part of the demographic that could afford to, would collapse on us. So it did a bit, but we got through it. And then the next big shock was the Brisbane floods, because we thought, oh my God, we've been sitting under a rain cloud for 3 months.
Our farmers now.
There goes the whole theory around local food.
Wow.
We are totally dependent on this 400-kilometre circumference around Brisbane.
Yeah.
What happens if it gets taken out? Like, what do we do? But interestingly, we actually fared better than the central markets that went right underwater and had to get the army to get them out. And we only missed one delivery day, I think, in that whole flood period.
Yeah,
so
all the small farmers, the small farmers didn't have big equipment. They didn't have lands cut, laser cut land that the flood waters just swept through. So all our farmers
most
were
of them did
delivering
really
food.
well. Yeah.
Wow.
So we kind of recognised what a crisis looked like. You know what I mean? We were already tuned to the signals. And so we knew that it would be on. We just didn't predict how much it would be on. So we really, in the first week of lockdown, our sales quadrupled.
It took 3 weeks.
By the end of the 3 weeks, sales went through the roof. A lot of our hospitality clients, because we do have a wholesale arm, for restaurants and cafes, they shut down, which was kind of good for us because on 2 levels, the farmers that that we would normally get to supply those guys could divert to our retail customers. But also the hospitality workers that were stood down, we could redeploy into Food Connect. So we employed an extra 10 people, expanded our delivery runs, put some more packers on, and we were able to kind of quickly, ramp things up, and they're held up, which was great.
Yeah, and we pirouetted all those hospitality. They all went into box systems. So we basically we spent a heap of time on the phone. How do you do a box system? And
from their cafes, like a takeaway, so that they could keep putting their fresh produce orders in every week.
I see. So
instead of using it to make meals for customers, they would box them up for their like as locals went to get their morning coffee, they would have fresh produce boxes to buy.
And did you pack the boxes for them, or you sort of advised them? Fantastic.
Yeah, we just provided them with the model and how to do it and the ideas.
And they just did little pop-ups.
Yeah, little pop-ups, and they could do baked goods, and then because we've got quite a few wholesale, like it's 50% of our business wholesale. So wholesale increased as a result of that.
And the buyers clubs.
Yeah, it was the buyers clubs increased by a margin. The farmers who were doing farmers markets suddenly said, well, let's do box systems as well. And so
box systems became all the rage during
COVID. It sounds it.
So like directly our business quadrupled in terms of, the volume of boxes that we were sending out, but also increased our customers like pivoting to create their own box systems from their farm gate or from their cafe also increased. So it was kind of, very interesting.
And from the shed's point of view, it took a little bit of a hit because the kitchen tenants who supplied into hospitality went, oh my God, what do I do? So because we owned the property on behalf of 530 care holders, as we called them, we just immediately said, if you're in trouble, don't pay any rent. Like this is well before the government come in with anything. And within 2 to 3 weeks, most of them had pirouetted their businesses. We hate the word pivot. That's pirouette it requires balance, finesse, artistry, skill, conversation. So basically, Jeff, who's our facilities coordinator, he just helped them do whatever they need to do to reorientate their business and either distribute through us at Food Connect, or there was just so many conversations
They did their own
So-
home deliveries as well.
Yeah, it was just, and they tweaked their software or they repackaged. Like one of them who supplies into IGA all over Australia, they just repackaged everything. Oh, and they also sold into the entertainment centre and a few other places. They just repackaged everything and went direct retail. And you know, it was just one of those things of, you know, we've got 27 tenants under the one roof in this shed who all just worked as one to, you know, they were packing boxes for us, doing this at night time, talking software, you know, all periods of the time. We had quite a few meetings, phone calls, just obviously the wholesale team were really busy. It was just all autonomously, like in solidarity, working together to go, righto, what do we all need to do to, you know, keep, stay alive as a business, but also as we sort of saw this as an opportunity, start to thrive. It was beautiful to watch.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I do invite anyone to put their hands up or state a question if you'd like to ask our expert panelists. For just to bridge that, I guess it'd be good to hear if you, during COVID, were able to advise other businesses or other businesses around Brisbane. Were you sort of asking, was anyone asking for advice or information, or were you able to sort of support any other food businesses nationally?
Yeah, so well, there was because we're a part of the big OFN, the Open Food Network. There was quite a few. We organised, or were part of a call, a week to week, you know, solidarity calls. Just how's everything going for everyone, and a lot of other spin-off conversations, you know, and how we can support other businesses who were looking for solutions to the, you know, what to do during COVID. Obviously, here in Brisbane, there was there was quite a lot of businesses were talking to all the team at Food Connect about, you know, farmers get, you know, it was just a melting pot of people advising other people, all autonomously. Brisbane is a bit self-reliant in that way. There's no real leadership as such. It's just a big,
because there's no interest from government in what we do at all at the local, state or federal level.
Really?
So that benign neglect, you know, has created this kind of weird resilience, because we've all just had to get on with it. So, you know, the example with Moving Feast in Melbourne, where a whole bunch of social enterprise cafes and you know, farmers and food businesses got together to, you know, do a really great initiative, was fantastic. But it did require philanthropy to get it through, and, you know, a few others. And it was interesting because it got a lot of airtime, and it got a lot of and it was a great initiative. I loved every bit of it. And, you know, kudos to Beck Scott being like a superstar entrepreneur to, you know, lead the way. It was just interesting that, you know, here we are in little old Brizzy just getting on with it. You know, totally under the radar. Like, and it's not until we tell the story, like last week I was invited to give a speech to the Lord Mayor of Brisbane, and I told them our COVID story, and they were like, oh my God, like, you guys need to submit an application for a Lord Mayor's Award.
Another one.
Oh, wow.
Like,
You're like, we're very busy.
Yeah. I mean, we don't do it for that stuff. But, you know, like, it's really interesting how that benign neglect over the decades has led to just this kind of attitude of, well, we just get on with it and we just
do it. Yeah.
And the networks really are like mycelium, you know, they just pop up where they're required, basically, magically. And we saw that during the floods as well. And so it's an interesting story here in Brisbane.
Sounds it. Yasmin, you've got your microphone on. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, very impressive, great story. I'm part of a group that worldwide setting up to look at localisation as opposed to globalisation. So part of that is obviously food is a huge part of that. In the area that I specifically at, we do have a couple that have connected with some farmers, and there's a shed on the Sunday, but that's just our area. I think it's so important that these tools and resources are available to other communities who are looking to do this to protect our food sovereignty. And I'm just wondering about your willingness to be able to share that hybrid model that you looked at of how you set it up with Food Connect, you know, from a proprietary limited to allowing I think the word that you used was that, you know, where it couldn't be sold, that mission lock. And, you know, how do you feel about sharing that to be able to allow other communities to create what you've done in Brisbane? And I used to live in Queensland, and went to heard about Food Connect, and I had no idea. So amazing to meet you guys. But I'm back down in WA, and I really think that it's so important in the future now that we've got, not just for social reasons, but, you know, that we are protected in our food and our farmers, because otherwise everything's just going to get sold off to China. Like in WA at the moment, our biggest problem story is all of the strawberry growers can't get any backpackers because of the closed borders, and therefore billions of dollars of strawberries are just going to waste. And, you know, if these systems were in place, we would be better off for the farmer and the consumer. And the big problem now is they'll probably get sold, these farms to China, and then we've lost our land. You know.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it's a great opportunity for us to inwardly look at our domestic needs and think more strategically about that, and look at it through the localisation lens and the economic multiplier lens. But you can find, we've been sharing the model and what we've done for many years. I think AFSA will have some great resources if you jump on them. But our particular, like our constitution is on OFN, the Open Food Network's Learn page. Yeah, if you look at you look across their thing, you'll drop on their Learn page. They've got OFN and AFSA have got, you know, a huge number of resources that you can, you know, tap into and just take. Yeah, there's plenty. I mean, and there's lots of books written on, you know. I mean, the main thing is that you don't cookie cut what we've done or what anyone's done. My ethos from the start was it has to come out of the farmers who live around Brisbane and the people from Brisbane. So it has to reflect the genius in them and the genius of place. For it to be totally, you know, they design it and they develop really strong roots for whatever it comes out of, you know, your thinking. It has to be, you know, deeply philosophical and, you know, have values that are core to everyone. And that might be a little bit of a longer process, but my belief is that well, it's shown that once you do the hard work in working with people around you and the farmers around you, you end up with a much stronger organisation and you know, a much more exciting organisation. And, you know, like I always say that, you know, we've got sort of the final frontier for humanity is to get along, and working in community with others in a multi-farmer CSA, as we've done here, is the ultimate, is like, you know, like having children, you know, it really tests you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Tests your love muscle.
Thank you, Yasmin. Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question who is on this evening?
Thanks, Leslie. That's a lovely comment. I'm
Oh,
glad.
yes.
Yes.
Here we are. So Joe's asked, this is probably an obvious question, but do you have multiple separate CSAs, as in CSAs for each product, like veggies, milk, meat, etc.?
No, it's
Do for me.
Well, the theory of change, my model in the early days was all about farmers getting their confidence and then developing your own CSAs. So we started off with a 3-hour radius and then a 4-hour radius, and then a 5-hour radius around Brisbane. But my request to every farmer who joined Food Connect in those early years, remember this is 2004, 5, 6, when there wasn't Facebook and social media, and there was a lot of disquiet amongst farmers who were being screwed by the central markets, was that they had to work really hard at developing their own CSA as they gained confidence, and work with other farmers and replicate what we were doing in Brisbane, so we could get back to that 2-hour radius for the majority of products. So in the case of meat, we tried to do meat because one of our farmers said, "Can you do meat?" But we ended up putting it back onto the meat farmers, and now we have 4 or 5 meat CSAs who supply through Food Connect, but we don't have anything to do with. Like, they just basically
Drop off.
they deal directly with them. We don't take any financial anything from them.
And just to jump in, Rob, sorry, that is the definition of a CSA. It has to have that sort of direct connection between producer and eater.
Yeah, well, that form of solidarity, like in our case, sort of more of a hybrid box / using the principles of CSA. So it's important to think about the principles of CSA, and obviously, there's 7 core principles to CSA. You can, it's like Emma's president of Queensland Social Enterprise Council, and they're always on endlessly debating the definition of what is a social enterprise. We don't want to debate the definition of a CSA. At the root of it, we're trying to radically transform how people grow and eat food. Like, that's basically, at the end of it. And we need people basically really connected to where their food comes from, paying in advance as much as possible. So in the early years, we had people paying 2 years in advance, cash into the Food Connect system. We tried paying farmers in advance. There was just so many ways we tried to iterate those principles of a CSA. I remember having a meeting with all the farmers about 2008, putting our P&L up on a big whiteboard and going through the whole process, and a big, deep conversation about what could we do with the surplus that met those principles. And they said, supply us with, don't pay us in advance, actually give us more opportunities to educate ourselves, more opportunities to meet restaurants and cafes, more opportunities for them to go direct. You don't have to pay us in advance. So it's always having a conversation between eaters, yourselves as facilitators, even your transport. You have to talk about the truck drivers in this mix as well. They've been screwed over by Linfox. They've all, I remember, there's been so many disaster stories about how the industrial food system has completely gutted the logistics that used to exist within 2 to 3 hours radius around Brisbane. Yeah. And we've had to rebuild that,
Yeah, it's an interesting part of the food system that isn't often talked about, and that's the distribution side. Between the farmer and the eater, all those points that, of contact. Are you going to the loo? He's abandoning, he's got to go to the loo. All those points of contact, from farmer to plate. There's all those middlemen that take a cut. So how can we create a model that can feed more than just, 50 to 100 families, consistently really good food to a wider geographical area, but do it in a way that's equitable and fair to everybody in the value chain. So yes, we're trying to rebuild back not just the farmers' capacity to be able to be great farmers, but also to, all the other people that are an integral part of it, especially in Australia with such, huge distances that need to be travelled, even in local areas.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of that same story. It's like go big or get out.
There's definitely a sweet spot. Like Food Connect, we've never got to a point where we're so big that we've had to say, okay, let's stop now, because we have always just barely survived in terms of our profit. And when we do make a profit, we tend to put that back into the Food Connect Foundation to run events and advocacy, activities and education and the like. But but when we do get to a certain point, you know, we have a goal, that's the time where we'll just say, okay, we're enough. But the interesting thing is, by educating a lot of our customers, we've got quite a few wholesale customers that do their own box systems. And we've noticed a trend that after a year or two, they go off on their own and no longer, they form their own direct relationships with their local farmers in their area. So, you know, Stanthorpe, Bow Desert, Kingaroy, Toowoomba, like all these people that we have supplied over the years have used Food Connect almost like as a safe place to start up.
Yeah.
And they still,
ways.
and they still use us.
Yeah.
Like
in times of crisis, especially.
Yeah. Or as a way of forming a relationship, because there's 13 microclimates around Brisbane identified. And I thought, well, okay, if we can.
We're very lucky. We've got great seasonal.
Yeah. You know, very seasonal. And they recognise really early on, the Stanthorpe, the granite belt growers can link themselves up with the Sunshine Coast growers, and then the citrus growers around the lower Burnett, or anywhere in the Burnett. And there was this always at the front doorstep of Food Connect farmers talking about, trading produce to either supply farmers markets or do their own box system or whatever else it is they do. It's been always having farmers, and that was one of the things that popped up for me, getting back to the resilience in community and the idea of solidarity, was as a dairy farmer, I knew dairy farmers are generally pretty cooperative. We generally have belonged to a cooperative. We sell our milk into one platform. But with fruit and veggie farmers, they're always sort of a little bit separated from each other and a bit competitive. And as a dairy farmer, and I still suffer from scarcity mentality, as a result of being a farmer. So I wanted to come up with a model that actually took away, or in some way didn't allow the scarcity mentality and those competitive instincts to come in and bring farmers together around a single cause, whether they farm biodynamically, organically, or whatever I wanted, or not at all, any of those, beyond organic. Because for me, it's not, if you encourage, it's almost, sometimes some of those labels disincentivize solidarity. They'll just go there, they'll just go to biodynamic meetings or organic meetings, or think that my product is, should be valued more highly than yours, and why are you putting it in that box? And I had all these original discussions in the early years, and I was so determined that no certification was needed which is the principle of the CSA, you have direct contact with the farmer. So that built solidarity, that idea of a multi-farmer CSA built solidarity.
Randall engineering, collaboration, community, not competition.
Yeah, it was.
That's a great statement. Collaboration and community, not competition.
Yes.
Which is so hard for farmers to enter into that place, which is why we see a lot of new farmers, young farmers, just completely sidestep that issue. They're not burdened with that legacy of 4 or 5 generations of just being screwed over and not trusting anyone and hating city folk, and all the baggage that I had with me when I lost the farm. And it's taken me many years to sort of go, well, these city folk are all right. They really,
Yeah, my father's a sheep grazier, and that is definitely the sentiment, that sort of, the city people have no idea, they don't know what it takes, they couldn't do it to save their lives, that sort of just, real disconnect of, and I think Australia's the most urbanized country in the world, so.
Robert used to go into the city and say, what do they do in those tall buildings? They just like storage
little like
tape pushers.
Yeah, so no, it's whatever the model, if anyone's out there sort of wanting to take inspiration, that would be the one key thing, is to connect people at a human level and get them to participate in it, even if it's. I remember the first one of our first customers, she rang and said, she was on the phone to me ordering a box, and I said, oh, what do you do? And she said, I'm an English teacher. I said, oh, she's a teacher. And then she said, I said, what sort of teacher? And she said, English teacher. I said, oh, you'd be perfect for writing the farm letter. She said, what does that mean? And I said, oh, you'd have to interview farmers. And she said, I've never spoken to a farmer in my life. And I said, well, you know, they're not going to, you know, they're not going
Bite your
to
head
bite your head off. You just have to ask them how many acres, you know, a list of things, and would you be able to do that? And she said, no worries at all. And she wrote the farm letter for the first 2 years and then become a farmer. Actually, one of our, and then become a farmer. Like, we see so many of our staff come through and become farmers. I had, I don't know whether Bridget is on the line tonight, I don't know whether, but she was one of our staff members for 4 or 5 years, you know, from when she was an 18-year-old going through university. Her and her husband now are setting up a CSA in South Australia.
Fantastic.
Never, not from a farming background. You know, it's amazing what happens when you get people to participate in being a part of the solution and practicing it rather than thinking about it and philosophizing about it and just getting stuck in. It's going to be a dog's
Philosophy is
breakfast.
important, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a few more questions. Yasmin, your mic is back on if you'd like to ask something else.
Yeah, so there's some statistics with the amount of farming that we've got in Australia, that if 10% of farmers change from their traditional methods to more regenerative agriculture, and also then started growing things like hemp, where you can have 55,000 different products from oil through to flour and things like that, that we could actually reverse our carbon emissions for 10 years. So have you noticed any change with the number of farmers that may have been originally doing more traditional methods that have transitioned into more sort of regenerative or more or less chemical sort of farming?
Oh, absolutely. There's a few on the line tonight. Yeah, no, we've, it's a precondition. As I said before, you don't have to do much to excite. So I should go back a step. So when I originally went out and sought the farmers, I knew that farmers didn't want me approaching them with a clipboard or a whole, you know, these are the things you should do. I would have a cup of tea, a bit of a conversation, a sandwich, and then as I'm leaving, I would give them an 8-point checklist where they could self-assess the character of their farm, and it asked questions that got to the root of why they're farming and re-inspired them about why they were farming. And once that was complete, farmers would then go, okay, I've been given agency now to do all the things that I want to do, including be at the table in setting the price. And just that simple thing, and be acknowledged by city folk as well. That acknowledgement, remember, Emma, when Emma first started.
Yeah, when I first joined as a city cousin in 2007, we got a delivery, our first delivery, and in the box were these...
This is before we were together. Just to clarify, this is Emma, just as a
I was
city
just
cousin.
a customer / city cousin. Anyway, so we got these apples in the box, and they were tiny, you know, like I'd never seen such tiny apples before. So I rang the next day and I said to Rob, you know, the apples are perfect for school lunch boxes.
I thought she was ringing me for a date.
No, that wasn't on my mind at all. I just wanted more of those lunchbox apples. And anyway, he said, look, don't tell me about the apples. Here's Joe's number. Go and ring him and tell him he grew them. Go and tell him, you know, that they're great. So I did, and I spent about an hour and a half on the phone with this person who I'd never met before, talking about lunchbox size apples. And he rang up the next day and he said, that's why I'm farming. That's what gets me out of bed. I had an extra spring in my step this morning, and just that acknowledgement means the world. So
yeah,
fantastic.
pretty amazing.
Great story. Thank you.
Yeah, and if
We're
you
right.
get your kids to ring the farmer direct, you know,
yeah,
that's always pretty inspiring to have a farmer or to have a city kid ring them and say, those kiwi fruit, oh, you know, whatever. It's amazing. The simplest things excite farmers and give farmers hope and confidence, and they go out and they do what, you know, they unfold what they want to do without you having to
So like pre-COVID, we would take our customers out whenever we could to meet farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes we do like a stay over camping trip like in
Oh.
Stanthorpe region, or just a day trip in, you know, the peri-urban, you know, extremities of Brisbane. And the customers always have to, you know, bring a gift, a homemade gift for the farmer. That's the rule of attending a farm tour. And if they've got kids, the kids have to write them a special message or a card or something. And that to the farmer, like the reviews we get from farmers after the farm tours are better than the customer reviews.
That's great.
Just get so much out of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and we take.
Oh,
we
sorry,
do-
Rob, hang on. We're right on 7 p.m.
Oh.
But we don't necessarily have to finish. If you're happy to stick around, there are a few more questions. I just wanted to let all of the people online know if they want to go, more than welcome. And you can always come back and listen to the end of this if you'd like. So one of the questions, there is a question on, you guys can read them too. I saw there was a question on a book that you were writing on Aboriginal elders. Is there an answer to that?
Working with that, yeah. So
Writing a book though.
for years and years and years,
Are we?
I was I'd been reaching out to Indigenous people because I wasn't going to sell any bush food, because there was a thing that happened when I was after I lost the farm, and I was a bit destitute for a while, and I wanted to. It caused me to reflect on my 4 generations of the Pekin family losing land compared to the, you know, generations, you know, thousands of generations of Indigenous people losing their land. And I felt that I didn't want to do anything or sell any bush food or anything without their consent. And particularly I wanted to have some sort of economic reconciliation. I felt that a lot of the stuff that out there, you know, this is going back quite a few years, was very tokenistic. As genuine as it was tokenistic. It wasn't deep enough for me. So we had a great. We were reaching out many years later. Even, you know, we had a group of them out here around the dining table, and all of a sudden all these Indigenous people turned up, and we had a yarning circle, and Bruce Pascoe was there, and we had this really big conversation. And it was before the shed. All that sort of stuff, and it ended up that a big Indigenous community bought into the shed. And Auntie Lilla Watson and Mary Graham, both absolutely amazing, learned, you know, individuals with a lot of wisdom. They've just filled me and what we do here at the shed with something richer and deeper, more profound than we'd ever thought, in terms of relationships with tenant, the way we see custodianship of the shed, the way we write leases, for instance. Like, it's very tangible stuff. The way we go through a process which is all based on Indigenous epistemology, non-judgment, balance, very practical, you know, tough love sort of stuff. Particularly Mary Graham, she's very, you know, economic, you know, the Indigenous economics. So pretty much we don't do anything here at the shed without the Indigenous elders giving us, you know, the heads up that that's okay. And it's been pretty powerful, for us. Yeah.
And we're not writing a book, but the chair of the Food Connect Foundation, her dad, well, she's posthumously published her dad's book. And it's called The River Story, and they're based on the Dawson River. They're from the Dawson River, which is near Rockhampton or Theodore in Queensland. But these girls this family has been brought up, this generation's been brought up in Brisbane in the Murray community, and they're a huge part of the shed. And we're hoping that we have a lot more, not just events, but in terms of our governance, in terms of the way we relate, in terms of the way we make decisions at the shed, it's going to be a lot more integrated in terms of how we work alongside our Indigenous elders and communities. Yeah. So it's more than just about the food, it's about relationships.
Sure. And yeah, I mean, I guess you as Food Connect are really showing and leading the way in terms of how to sort of move beyond that tokenistic level and really and really meet with the community that you
Yeah.
you live alongside and serve. And
Yeah, I mean, I encourage everyone to do that. Like, it's not a scary thing, and all it takes is a cup of tea.
Mhm.
And in fact, we're actually going to start doing that here at the shed. We're going to have a monthly cup of tea, morning tea, just to formalise that process, and it'll just be open door. Whoever wants to turn up can come and have a cup of tea with any of the Indigenous elders that are here that day. And it's just, it's just about unlearning, because our minds are just as colonised, in many respects. So in terms of the whole journey of decolonising the land, we also need to decolonise our minds, and the best way to do that is to immerse yourself in Indigenous culture.
For sure. There's actually another interesting book written by a friend of ours who covers that. It's called The Relationship is the Project, and it's all about working with
title.
with community. It's fantastic. But the first it's by Jade Lilly. It's the first chapter goes into a lot of that. And while I'm at I'm also going to mention the ABSA book, Farming Democracy, has a wonderful array of stories, farmers firsthand, sort of how they got started, and sort of the trials and tribulations and joys of farming. It's a really good read as well. Do you guys want to answer the questions that are directly in the chat that relate to Food Connect? They're quite specific.
Yeah, so
Right.
there's one here: how large a volume of produce do you need to be able to supply in order to be able to supply food to Food Connect? That's by Samuel.
Okay, so you don't anything. We take backyard. We even have kids who pick lemons from the backyard, supply Food Connect. So any size. We also have, that's sort of like a great thing. But we also have buyers clubs. So when a young farmer is starting up, or young farmers, we often say supply that buyers club direct to build their confidence up and get their volumes up to a certain level, and then they gradually migrate to Food Connect with larger volumes. So we sort of have pathways for farmers to get confidence, so no, it doesn't matter what volume you are. We're
If you're a big volume farmer, one of the strategies that we've got coming down the line, it's not in place yet, is to tap into the social procurement opportunities that more and more state governments are going to start putting out there in terms of supplying hospitals, prisons, I mean, it's a very competitive space, because particularly prisons, they just get shit food and they go, it's bad food and it's very, very cheap. But we're trying to, encourage the buyers at government that, everyone deserves good food. Actually helps your thinking. So we're hoping that, the larger volume farmers can actually start engaging in, especially the farmers in the middle who are in conversion from conventional to organic. We can see that social procurement piece as being a very key piece of the puzzle, transitioning them.
Is that Joe's question?
Yes.
Do your CSA farmers align their deliveries to
We
Food
just need to
Connect?
clarify.
So the consumers who are members of the multiple CSA can pick up all their orders at the same time? Yes, we do. It's so basically, whether you pick up from the city cousin, it all gets delivered at the one time, or you can pick up here from the homestead, of course, or from the shed now, as it's known. We sort of we've built the model around being as flexible and as convenient. It's much more convenient than a lot of other systems out there. And also, even to the point where a lot of our city cousins have set up their own box systems or become buyers clubs themselves. They also have storage capacity to be able to take. So if someone says, "Oh God, I can't get there tonight," they'll often put it in the fridge and you can pick it up the next day or the day after that. So there's lots of people out there who are aligned with us and will be flexible around their needs.
Okay. Looks like that's it.
Walking the walk.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we should probably wrap up there. The only other question that I sort of wanted to ask was, is there any advice that you have, or any challenges that you face that you would sort of any recommendations, that you would make for anyone who's running or involved in a community-based organisation?
Yeah, so I think it goes to what Joe's just asked that question about a hybrid box system. I mean, hybrid vigour, we all know this term, hybrid vigour, is whatever you do, and it doesn't have to be a food system-based community activity, is you build it around the lived experience you get involved and the community and the place that you're in. And that's what I mean by hybridise. You just basically bring your ideas, whatever ideas come from those people who are involved, and from the history of the region, generally the history of the region, particularly going back 2 generations. Go think of your grandfathers or your grandmother's generation. They've got, like they were doing preserving and a whole bunch of things that's now very, very trendy these days. And yes, and then not to forget, basically, and I think probably, one of the things that we've become very aware of, and we've been saying for a long time, is that unless we really adopt First Nations wisdom and practices and thinking, then we're only going to touch the surface of what we need to do. They've got so much wisdom and knowledge and experience that once you tap into it, will open up profound epiphanies, particularly once you practice them. It's all right hearing it in theory, and which is profound enough in itself, but once you practice it, a whole bunch of deeper things unfold for you and the people around you. But you need to really be on your game.
It's not easy decolonising your mind.
Yeah, and just go. And I mean, that's the greatest thing with Emma and I.
Play the long game.
Us whiteys, we're pretty wedded to being good and perfect, and not exposing ourselves too much, and being we've got to be vulnerable. We've got to open ourselves up to becoming and it's such a beautiful thing when you particularly for a white man, when you become vulnerable, when you open yourself up to lessons and learnings. It just makes you such a stronger person as a result of it, which is the opposite of what we think by being stoic. As farmers, we're stoic, and we know what's best, and I'll get through this and we'll tough it out. It's being the opposite of all of those sort of things. You're smiling there, Amy. You're envisaging your father.
No, it's a fantastic way to end, I think, what has been a really interesting discussion. Thank you so much for your time this evening. And lots of people chatting on the chat as well, so thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Pleasure. We have another solidarity session, our 7th one, coming up in 2 weeks. If anyone wants to join, then it's on the 26th of October. We'll be speaking with Farmer Incubator and chatting with them on collaborative ways to farm. So that's it from us. Thanks again for your time. Thanks, everyone. Feel free to turn on your cameras if you'd like to.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I'd love to see your
turn a video on and wave.
Oh my God, how many people are there?
Oh.
Hey, Ellie.
Hey.
All back in your armchairs.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Look, there's Scotty in Canberra.
Cheers, everyone.
How you going, Scotty?
Some familiar faces.
in Canberra right now.
Freezing. It's freezing in Vic, I can tell you that.
All the best.
It's well above 0 degrees here.
It's going to be 27 here tomorrow.
Spring big time.
Look, shooty.
Winter's not long enough for us.
Righto. Cheers, everyone.
All right.
Take care.
Bye, everyone. Good night. Thanks again.
Thank you, and thank